The land of Israel and the people of Israel has been so much in the news for such a long time, not just recently, but throughout history. It's a land where the people are persecuted. There's been movements to and from various areas, but today we want to focus in on not just Israel, but the whole Middle East area that surrounds Israel, and look at the way the Christians are being persecuted in and around the nations. I'm reminded of the words that Jesus himself spoke in John chapter 16 when he spoke to his disciples, and he said, if they persecuted me, they'll persecute you. If they kept my word, they would keep your word. So today it's great to have my good friend Regan back here. It's like a new season. Yeah. It's a new season started, isn't it? We're coming into the new program structure. The structure is the same, and the nations in many ways are the same. Persecution is rife. But you've just come back from that very area we're talking about.
Indeed.
And you have some stories to tell. So welcome to you, Regan. My name's Alistair Scott, as you probably know, and welcome to the Persecuted Church.
Well, Alistair, you've been missed, and our viewers, you've been missed. This program has been missed. It's such an important program, and you know, I can't tell you how many times I was seeing headlines or seeing stories, and I was thinking, oh wow, you know, that really needs to be covered by the Persecuted Church. And really, it's the tragic reality of this world that there is an increase of troubles, there is an increase of trials, and that's across the world. But right now, it would be good to unpack a little bit of what's going on in Israel, some of the conversations I had, some of the interactions, some of the things I've observed. I think it's always very important to remember that there is no perfect place on this earth. There is no place that is free from sin, no person that is free from sin. And to be able to have that conversation honestly and to recognize that as a result we all are affected by that, and that's Israel included, to differentiate between sins of a nation and sins of individuals, to be able to unpack some of what's going. But Alistair, it's become a bit of a trend this past couple of years. It feels like it's increased this year to have one-time allies of Israel as a nation completely turn against Israel as a nation in any and every way. And to actually spread a lot of talk about Israel systematically destroying Christianity in the Middle East. And we already did a program about that.
We did, I remember, it's quite a while ago. And yes, we know that there is a certain amount of persecution from the certain parts of the nation. It's not a regular thing, it's not a general thing, but there are certain movements in the far right they carry an ideology which is kind of alien to some of the things that we as Christians believe. So there is a certain amount of persecution, but it's the only nation in the Middle East where you can practice your Christian faith without great hindrances. And you can practice every other religion you might follow without being persecuted to the high degrees as you would in some of the other Middle Eastern nations. And I know, I was like you, I was watching the news and seeing things happen in Syria and thinking things in Egypt and things in Jordan and things that were happening in Lebanon. And I was thinking, wow, I need to make a note of this, because when Regan comes back, we must feature these. But you've heard it firsthand. I think there's nothing better than to be in the middle of the nation and surrounded by those nations that are really persecuting Christians, and come back with some stories that you've heard personally.
Well, first of all, I think it needs to be said that it is truly remarkable to be able to be in a place that is surrounded by enemy nations, right? Not because that's Israel's choice, but because these are nations that refuse to accept the legitimacy of its existence. To be in a place where, in the time we were there, about 6 weeks, had to go into a bomb shelter 4 times, 4 different occasions, because of missiles being fired and targeting particular areas. And yet still there be a sense of great freedom. And I dare say, to some degree, at the very least, a greater openness and willingness to have conversation freely. than even in many contexts in the West. So there's that on kind of it's a large part of its personality. Israelis are very open. Arabs are very open, whether they're Arab Israelis or professed Palestinians. It doesn't matter who they are. There's an openness to conversation. Hospitality is deeply embedded in the cultures that are there, and that's really across the Middle East to some degree. But what's interesting in Israel is that that hospitality extends, and there's interest even when you are openly Christian by the vast majority. Nationally, there's no constitution officially of the State of Israel, but there's the Declaration of the Establishment of the State of Israel, which serves as the Constitution, essentially. May the 14th of 1948 is when we see the nation and its independence declared. And it has some cogent points that it makes specifically regarding freedom and freedom of religion. One point says that the state will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. It will guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture. And it says it will safeguard the holy places of all religions. And there's a call, even at that point in time, knowing that there were individuals already being called out by the Grand Mufti, Arab individuals in the land at the time, leave, we're going to come in with our armies and we're going to clear the way. It was the call of the Mufti. But the call was to Arabs, whether Christian background or Muslim background, to participate in the upbuilding of the state and the basis of full and equal citizenship. Now, many accepted that, many rejected that. And really, this is the foundation. So foundationally and constitutionally, there is freedom of religion, and there is the ability to freely worship and practice our faith as followers of Jesus.
Yeah, I know we've covered some of the Islamic nations when we're doing the Persecuted Church, where they have this as part of the policy,
Correct.
But never practiced. In theory, you have freedom of religion. You could practice Christianity or whatever, whether it's Buddhism or anything else. But it tends to be Christianity that is put down. That's suppressed. If that's the best way of looking at it.
And it's the lines between. So it's like freedom of religion in keeping with Sharia law, but that's in keeping with Sharia law means if you leave Islam,
that's restrictive. Immediately, it's restrictive. But I remember, one of the times I was on a tour in Israel, and the reality of practicing your faith. I was sitting with the tour guide, and I think we'd just come through one of the tunnels, and we were waiting for the party to come through. And it was a Friday afternoon, around about 2:00 in the afternoon, and suddenly you could hear the mosques resounding across the whole of Jerusalem, and the noise, the noise that they make when they call to prayer. And my tour guide turned to me and said, in the Western world, they wouldn't believe you if you tell them that in Jerusalem at 3:00 or 2:00 in the afternoon, the Islamic people were proclaiming their God, proclaiming what they do, practicing their faith without any hindrance. And I said, you're absolutely right, because if we were to try and do that in some of the more or less liberal nations in the Middle East, you would not be allowed to do it. And that's why we must understand that Israel is so important to stand with them, because they do allow freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom of practice of religion. And it really spoke to me and most of the people in our team. We knew that anyway, but it was such a demonstration of the freedom they have to practice their faith, and yet they get accused of all sorts of things which are just not true.
That's right. And again, we have the national constitutional element that does not entail complete adherence or respect of that national constitutional element by each and every individual. I want to just briefly refresh our memory from some reports a couple of years ago of an increase of attacks on Christian leaders and various sites in the land, and we'll come back in just a moment.
The situation led Israeli President Isaac Herzog and Police Commissioner Yaakov Shabtai to meet leaders of the Orthodox and Catholic churches of the Holy Land.
In recent months, we've seen very serious phenomena towards the Christian denominations in the Holy Land. Our brothers and sisters, Christian citizens, feel attacked in their places of prayer, in their cemeteries, and on the streets.
Christians in Jerusalem's Old City say they are often harassed, spit on, and even physically attacked by religious Jewish youth.
I view this phenomenon as extreme and unacceptable in any shape or form. This phenomenon needs to be uprooted.
Earlier incidents include the desecration of a Protestant cemetery on Mount Zion, an attack on international Christians during a day of prayer for Jerusalem, and harassment at a Messianic concert in Jerusalem.
We must respect the members of all religions. We've committed to this since the dawn of our existence. This is the most basic commandment of love your neighbor as yourself.
Church leaders expressed their desire to work together with Israeli authorities.
We need to work together in order to encourage coexistence and solidarity between us, and the love between us, because we are brothers in the same state. We live in the same places, and we need to live together in quiet and peace.
Recently, Israeli Channel 13 reporter Yossi Eli went undercover as a priest for a day. Dressed in a robe, he walked through the Old City with Franciscan Father Alberto. In the first 5 minutes, he was spat at 5 times by Orthodox Jewish Israelis. In Haifa, Israel's police commissioner said the police are working to eradicate incidents and trends that affect the sense of security.
We're here to reassure you of that and to offer any assistance that may be required. As part of the cooperation between all the parties, we're working to bridge the gaps in places of conflict while simultaneously striving to provide the vital sense of security.
David Parsons from the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem says the attacks are coming from a fringe element.
Most Israelis welcome Christians here. They welcome Christian support. But there does seem to be a fringe, a small fringe on the religious right that for whatever motivations are trying to harass and give trouble for Christians here.
He also says it's a learning curve for Israel right now.
Jewish people wouldn't tolerate these sorts of attacks against them. In other countries, they're very vocal about it, and they shouldn't tolerate it here when their own co-religionists carry out similar attacks against Christians.
Parsons told CBN News the scriptures are clear about how Christians should treat the Jewish people.
Scriptures are clear that Genesis 12:3 says we need to bless the Jewish people. Isaiah says comfort them. Paul in Romans 11 says show them mercy. So we have biblical commands to stand with Israel, support them. We're not going to condition that support on whether or not these attacks are stopping, but it does make it harder for us to build support and friendship for Israel out there.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, it's good to be refreshed, as you say, and remind ourselves of what was happening a couple of years ago. But again, this is I talked about this before. It's the ultra-Orthodox who are the far right, and they have their own ideology, as I mentioned earlier. And so there was this attack, and it still happens occasionally. There are Christian communities, even recently in the last few months, where there have been attacks against Christian churches and so on. But it's not the general population of Israel.
Most Israelis are abhorred by it. They find this behavior abhorrent and are concerned by it, and there's a lot of there's routine condemnation of it. We've seen, regardless of who has been in political power, there's been this is not something we support. We condemn this action, and it's not just lip service. They do seek to, where there is evidence, where there is that proof that is shown, that it can be upheld in court. There is punishment of it. We've seen, though, in the past couple of months, recurrent claims of the plight of Palestinian Christians. And interesting, Alistair, you'd be fascinated to hear there's 2 believers I was able to meet while there in a neutral zone. There are 3 different zones, and this was kind of a no man's land sort of zone. And a Jewish believer introduced me to some Palestinian brothers, and we were able to have a very rich conversation. These guys love Israel as much as any Israeli. Yeah. They said some things which would be highly controversial, including, and they, because I was just asking questions. I was wanting to keep Christ and the gospel at the center of it, and God can take care of what He wants to take care of on the other stuff. But so they didn't quite fully know like where I might be, and they said, "Look, we don't know what you're hearing or what you're seeing over there, but from our perspective, and this isn't the perspective of the majority," they were very clear to say that, "we would be really happy if Israel annexed the West Bank." Now, I don't think that's actually going to happen for all manner of reasons, and many Israelis are very concerned by that prospect because they feel it creates a security issue, which, you know, that's something that has to be discussed. But the reason was, they said there'll be so much more freedom, especially for we who are believers. The thing is, if there's an issue and it ramps up and there's routine suppression by the various authority-related groups or militant groups, terror groups in not only Gaza but in the so-called West Bank area, in the Palestinian territories, that they're like, where will we go? We can't turn for help to Jordan or to Egypt. Where do we go? Who would we go to try to deal with this? Well, Israel is here. So people either go to the U.S., they can only get there, though, via Israel. If they're allowed to go to Israel, they'll go to Israel. If they're allowed to go to the U.S., they go to the U.S. And they can only go to the U.S. with permission from Israel.
Yeah.
And so this is how it works. So it was fascinating insight. I did have a sit-down conversation along with one of our producers at Revelation TV with the U.S. Ambassador Mike Huckabee, specifically asking him about some things he has said recently, or rather that the press reported him saying, in relation to potential ostracization and discrimination against Christians. And that program is forthcoming. Here's a little teaser of what to expect, and you can tune into that.
So he calls and, he said, "Mike, you're going to Israel. You're going to be my ambassador there. My job is to be the representative of the United States to the land of Israel, to its government, to its people, and to also be a servant to the 700,000 Americans who live in Israel, talking to the Gazans, the people who have lived there. And they want no part of Hamas in their future, none. How many countries in the history of the world have fed their enemies while the war is still going on? I think the heart, soul, essence of the conflict can only be viewed in the spiritual. What was intended for harm, God can use for good.
Well, that's going to be a program worth watching, and certainly as you had a little clip there, I can't wait to see the full interview and the revelations that's going to come on Revelation TV. It's kind of very special. And
it was great. And his insight, just to kind of tease it out a little bit more, is that there's a great deal of dishonesty, as in any place. Alistair, we have it here. Yeah. Like there's bureaucracy, there are issues. There are issues with receiving visas. There are issues with obtaining sponsorship for visa sponsorship certificates. These issues are here in the United Kingdom. They're there in the U.S. They're everywhere. It's not always a concerted effort or an organized effort to demonize, ostracize, denigrate, or deny Christian freedoms. Yeah. Sometimes that may influence a little bit, but a lot of times there are bureaucratic hang-ups, and Ambassador Huckabee indicated that some of the comments that he had made in relation to visas and Christians needing visas had been framed in a particular way that was unhelpful and inaccurate. There's also, you would have seen claims of an attack on a church in Taba.
Yes, I remember it well. And that too. I mean, it's always these stories have an angle. They have an agenda. They want to show something which not necessarily is the truth. That's why for us in Revelation TV, we try and dig in and research and make sure we are getting the bigger picture and then broadcasting it to our viewers. And that's important for my life as well. Is that I don't listen to a news report without researching its source and the agenda behind it. So you know the same.
There's disputation on so many things, and when you are getting conflicting stories and there's not credible witnesses, it's very difficult to arrive at any particular conclusion. You can look at some circumstantial things and accept, yes, there are individuals who are acting out of order, and Israel is routinely trying to restrain them and routinely condemns. There are people who are acting in a lawless way, and again, there's attempts to restrain and there are attempts to mete out justice in those cases. In relation to what's been, while I was there, right before and while I was there, massive furor over this attack is how it was framed on a church in Taba, which is near Ramallah. There's a lot that's just not holding water to it. And it's believed that, first of all, the remnant of this building was not destroyed. Headlines were saying destroyed.
Yeah, I remember.
It was destroyed. Not really touched that much. There were Jews and Palestinians who put a fire out. Who started the fire is what's being disputed. And why was the fire started? And some of these questions we'll never know, but they're framed in varying political ways. And so we can't build up our whole picture of a society on the basis of a couple of or handful of bad actors. You alluded to a passage earlier which reminds us and takes us back to the New Testament, where it is clear that there will be people who they are in Jerusalem, they're across the land of Israel, who will oppose the message of Jesus. That happens to this day. You can give out Bibles. Some people will tear the Bibles up. Others will receive them gladly. It's been the same through all of the centuries. Some Jews follow Jesus. Some Jews reject Jesus. It's not an inherently Jewish thing to reject Jesus. In fact, it's really, one could say, the most Jewish thing.
Exactly.
To accept Jesus.
Exactly, because I mean, I think it's getting more and more understood, even when you talk to Jews, that Jesus was a Jew. He came from the Judaic background, and he never ever denied the foundation of the faith. And it makes people think when you have that conversation, and it doesn't have to be a heated conversation. It has to be like we're speaking now, and listen and respond. It leaves people having to think, oh, I didn't even consider that. Because they look at Jesus as being the enemy of the Jews, and yet he never ever spoke about that. He said he came to the Jews, he came to his own people, the house of David, and they rejected him. But it's kind of an interesting time what's happening in Israel. I mean, one of the problems that they have a coalition government.
Right.
And
right.
As we, not so long ago, had a coalition government, you realize how much a government has to compromise in what it would like to do, because it has to keep its majority. And that's one of Netanyahu's biggest problems, is the far right or ultra-Orthodox parties have to be listened to, and you've got to work around that danger that they have an ideology which is not even what is your ideology, but you need to remain in power. So there is a lot of compromise in a way that has to be made in order to keep the government strong. And then we've seen in Israel, how many times have they had elections over the pre to the October 7, 2023. There was elections almost every 6 months. So it's a difficult nation to govern, and but generally the heart of the people is to accept Christianity, as long as it doesn't try to pull down the Judaic faith.
And it's important, there are difficulties, there are challenges that we have to be open about and acknowledge. Some of those are bureaucratic, some of those are dictated by who is in particular municipalities, governments, which particular party is most represented. And there's concerns. There's an active campaign ongoing that I've been informed of. You can find out about it at amendaliyah.com, which is an open call for the State of Israel to recognize the right of return of Jews who follow Jesus, which used to not be contested, but has become an issue. And how I put it on that, and in regards to some other things, is you can be a witch and be Jewish, you can be a Buddhist and be Jewish, you can be pretty much anything
Hindu
else and be Jewish, communist and be Jewish. Woe betide you if you're Jewish and you follow Jesus, in the mindset of those who are ultra-Orthodox and often are in places of power with the immigration in view. So, there are, as any country has, there are concerns, there are issues, but this is not a statewide thing, and we need to continue to pray into it. We need to continue to pray that God would galvanize His people and the believers who are there to be open, to be faithful, to be strengthened and encouraged.
I think it's true. We've seen since this October 7, 2023, there has been a coming together of the Christians and the Jews, and also the Palestinian believers. So thank you so much for watching this Persecuted. It's been such an interesting program. Looking at the Middle East is such an important part of our faith. So bless you. We'll see you again soon.